He laughed at me the way you laugh at something that doesn't know it's small. I was holding a cylinder to the glass. Outside, a child was singing the wrong words to something, badly, joyfully, completely. And he stood in the doorway and said it. You, and your little noises. The room went still in that particular way rooms go still, when everyone is deciding what to do with their face. I set the cylinder down. Carefully. I left before the laughter finished. Before the room decided. Carrying 3 years of work in a case that suddenly felt very light, and the knowledge that I had been waiting for a reason to go that I was never going to receive any other way. If you have ever walked out of a room while someone was still laughing, if you know the exact weight of your own hands in that moment, then you already know what the story is. Stay. If that feeling lives somewhere in you, subscribing means it finds you again next time. I did not take everything. I took the cylinders. All 41 of them, nested in their case in the order I made them. Oldest to newest, the wax dark and faintly sweet-smelling from 3 years of Phoenix summers. I left the work table. I left the recording horn I'd repaired twice with materials I'd sourced myself because replacements didn't exist anymore. I left the window I kept cracked at night because the sound of the 202 freeway at 2 a.m. had a quality I could never name, something between breathing and dreaming, and I had been meaning for 3 years to capture it properly. I did not capture it. I left it to the room. Packing took 11 minutes. I know because the clock on the territorial-era mantelpiece, original to the building, kept wound because Silas believed silence was a form of poverty, read 5 minutes to midnight when I lifted the cylinder case, and 7 minutes passed when I closed the door behind me. Not slammed. Closed. The hinges were tight. They had always been tight. The sound was final, without trying to be. The corridor was lit the way it always was, low, amber, old. The building near Heritage Square had been many things before Silas claimed it. A territorial courthouse, a private residence, a hotel for 12 years in the 1940s when the owner hadn't known what else to do with the bones of it. The walls held all of that. They held other things too. That was why I'd come here originally. The walls were full of old sound, compressed and waiting, and I'd thought I could find it if I pressed the wax close enough to the stone. I found it. I recorded it. I never played those cylinders for him. He was in the East Corridor, near the tall window that faced Monroe Street. His back was to me, silver head bent, one hand braced on the windowsill, speaking in the low register he used when he didn't want the words to carry. Aurelio Voss stood beside him, watching Silas's profile with the particular attention of someone who has learned not to interrupt. Aurelio had never looked at me that carefully in 3 years. I had noted this without bitterness. Neither of them looked up as I walked past. That was the last thing. Not the laughter. The laughter had been the wound, sharp and clean. This was the other kind. The absence of a glance. The confirmation that my leaving registered the same as my presence had. Nothing gained. Nothing subtracted. I kept walking. The front door of the building was heavy oak, original hardware, and it opened onto the night heat of downtown Phoenix the way a held breath opens. All at once, the air changed. Late October, which meant the days still climbed past 90, but the nights had developed an edge that Arizonans called cold, and everyone else called relief. The asphalt held warmth from the afternoon. The sky above the city was that particular orange-gray that comes from a million lit windows pressing up against low cloud cover. I stood on the step for 3 seconds, not hesitating, orienting. Then I walked to the bus stop on Washington Street and sat down with the cylinder case on my lap and waited. The bus came in 4 minutes. I got on. I found a seat near the back where the window didn't close all the way, and the night air came through the gap in a thin, constant stream that smelled like the city, exhaust, and something green from wherever the irrigation channels ran, and underneath both of those, the mineral smell of desert that Phoenix never entirely loses no matter how much concrete is laid over it. I put my hand on the cylinder case, not to open it, just to feel the weight of it. 41 cylinders. 3 years of Phoenix compressed into wax. Children on Camelback Road. Screen doors in the Garfield district. Old men arguing pleasantly in Spanish outside the tienda on 7th Street at noon. The sound of rain on terracotta, actual rain, the kind the desert produced twice a year with the urgency of something making up for lost time. I had recorded all of it. There was one cylinder I had not labeled. I pressed my palm flat against the lid of the case over the place where that cylinder sat. Last winter, passing his office at a particular hour, I had heard him. Not speaking, not on a call, alone and humming something. The melody was incomplete, fragments only, like something he had learned once and was no longer sure he remembered correctly. I had pressed the cylinder to the door without deciding to. The wax had caught it. 7 seconds of that fractured, quiet sound. I had never played it back. I had told myself I was preserving the integrity of the recording. The bus moved south. Phoenix opened up on either side, the downtown towers giving way to the lower spread of residential streets, the grid of it, the particular democracy of a city that had been built fast and practical on land that hadn't been designed for permanence. I looked at the window. My own face looked back, faint, doubled against the dark outside. I didn't look away from it. I had been the warmest thing in that building for 3 years. I had known this. I had stayed anyway, which was its own kind of answer to a question I hadn't been honest enough to ask clearly. Why did you stay? Because something in me believed that warmth, if offered long enough, would eventually be received. Because I had been recording echoes for 8 years, and the thing I had not admitted, the thing I had kept hidden under the professional language of preservation and acoustic documentation, was that I had been hoping for one particular echo back. It had not come. The cylinder case was cool against my palms now, the night air having worked its way into the metal. Outside, Phoenix moved past in lit rectangles, living rooms, kitchens, the blue flicker of televisions, a woman standing at an open refrigerator staring into it the way you stare at something when you're not actually looking. I did not open the case. The bus stopped at McDowell and I got off because that was where the room I'd rented waited, small, ground floor, facing a street where the neighbors left their windows open, and I walked the 2 blocks with a case in both hands, and the city was loud with its ordinary sounds, and I found that the ordinary sounds, for the first time in a long time, were enough. 3 weeks is not long enough to forget anything. It is long enough to build a morning. Mine starts at 5:40, before the sun has committed to the day. I lace my boots on the porch step while the neighborhood is still mostly dark, the particular darkness of a residential street where 1 or 2 windows are already lit, yellow and domestic, belonging to people who start their days before anyone asks them to. I take the cylinder case and I walk. The Garfield district at that hour has a specific sound profile I had not anticipated. Old neighborhoods hold more than new ones. The wood expands and contracts with the temperature. The screen doors have a different give than aluminum frames. The concrete retains the previous day's heat and releases it slowly through the night, so that by dawn the sidewalks are still faintly warm underfoot. I press cylinders against things. A porch post on 9th Street, rough painted, the wood beneath it dry and deep. The bench at the bus stop on McDowell, where someone had left a paper coffee cup that was still releasing steam. The chain link at the playground on 7th where the regulars arrive, without exception, at 7. They are always there before me. 6 women, range of age somewhere between 65 and 80, each with a dog that reflects them in some architectural way, a compact woman with a compact terrier, a tall, loose-limbed woman with a greyhound that moved like water poured slow. They do not adjust their conversation when I arrive. They do not ask what I am doing with the recording horn. After the first week, one of them, the one with the greyhound, simply nodded at me as though confirming an appointment she had known about for years. I do not record them. Some sounds are not for cylinders. Bet Okafor appears on my porch uninvited, which I had decided to accept as a condition of living next door to her rather than a boundary question requiring resolution. She arrives with 2 cups she has already filled from her own kitchen, which means I have no say in the coffee strength, which is significant because Betty's coffee is dense enough to hold a spoon upright. She mispronounces my name as Elena, hard second syllable, confident as a signature, and has never corrected herself despite hearing me introduce myself twice to the mail carrier. She talks. I do not have to. This is the thing I had not known I needed, to be in the presence of someone who requires nothing from my words. Bet had 31 years of 8th graders. She knows how to fill a silence, without weaponizing it. She tells me about her sister in Tucson who remarried at 63 and is insufferable about it. About the noise ordinance dispute 3 houses down. About the Greyhound woman, Constance Reyes, apparently 71, retired federal judge, whose dog is named Objection, and who would like everyone to know this is not a joke. I laugh. Actual laughing, not the social kind. The coffee is terrible. The porch holds the early warmth. Bet has a way of looking at me sometimes, not often, and she never pursues it. A brief, direct look, like she has noticed something and filed it without comment. I notice her noticing. Neither of us says anything about it. These mornings are working on me. I can feel it, the way you feel a muscle you forgot you had when it stops aching, not a dramatic recovery, just the gradual return of something ordinary. I sleep without the low-grade vigilance that had lived behind my sternum for 3 years. I eat breakfast on the porch and watch the neighborhood arrive at itself. I record things that delight me without filing a rationale for why they matter. This is what I left for. I had told myself other reasons, cleaner ones, but this is the actual reason. I wanted to record things that delighted me and not have to justify the delight. I keep telling myself, I have no unfinished business with the building on Monroe Street. I wash dishes and make this argument to myself with some conviction. I reorganize the cylinder case, oldest to newest, and make it again, less convincingly. The third time I make it, I am standing in the kitchen at 11 at night, reorganizing the case a second time, and I stop with a cylinder in each hand and look at what I am doing. I am missing cylinders. Not many. 9. I work through them by location: the playground, the bus stop, the old hotel on Van Buren, the alley behind the restaurant on Roosevelt where the kitchen exhaust smelled like cumin and char on Tuesday nights. I account for 32. The other 9 I had left on the shelves in the workroom when I packed. I sit down on the kitchen floor with the case in my lap. I know which 9 they are. I had not let myself know until right now, but I know. The groan of the old wood in the east corridor, when the building cooled after midnight. The particular quality of silence on his floor at 3 a.m., not absence of sound, something denser than that, the sound of a place holding its breath. The radiator in the council room that clicked in a pattern of 4, then 3, then 4 again, reliable as a second hand. And one more, his palm against my workroom door. He had done it twice that I knew of, stood outside and pressed his hand flat to the wood, without opening it. I had felt the change in the room's air before I heard the contact. The second time, I had a cylinder ready. The wax caught the sound, the slow pressure of his hand, the creak of the door without the click of the latch, then the release. His hand lifting away, his footsteps retreating. I had labeled that cylinder with a date and nothing else. I go to my bag, not the equipment bag, the other one, the one I sleep with near the bed, and I find it. I do not remember putting it there. I must have, because here it is, cool and faintly waxy, sitting at the bottom beneath my phone charger, and a book I have not opened. I hold it for a while. The kitchen floor is tile. The tile is cold through my clothes. Then I hold it to my ear. The sound is 8 seconds. The slow weight of his palm. The door's low complaint. Then the withdrawal, the lift, and the space where sound had been. I do not move for a long time after it ends. I am not crying. I notice this with mild surprise. What I am doing is sitting very still, the way you sit when something has passed through you that you have not yet found the name for, not grief, not longing, something older than both of those, something that lives below naming. The cylinder is warm now from my hands. I put it back in the case. I close the lid. I go to bed, and I do not take the case with me because I am a woman who knows the difference between keeping something and letting it keep you, and I am 38 years old, and I have learned at least that much. I leave the kitchen light on. I do not go back to turn it off. I know things about Silas Robinson that he does not know I know. I spent 3 years in his building with a recording horn and the particular patience of someone who has learned that the most important sounds are the ones no one performs for you. I know that he takes his coffee at 4 in the morning and does not drink it, sets it on the windowsill, and lets it go cold, as though the ritual matters more than the result. I know that he reads standing up, one hand pressed flat on the desk, leaning over the page like a man bracing against weather. I know that he has not laughed. Not actually laughed, not the way he laughed at me in the 3 years I was there. What he did in that corridor was not joy. I know the difference now. I know how his building sounds without me in it. I know because I recorded it. Every register, every hour, the whole architecture of that place pressing its sounds into my wax, and somewhere in those 9 cylinders I left on those shelves is the answer to a question he is only now beginning to ask. Here is what I imagine. That Aurelio Voss is very busy. Aurelio has always been most comfortable with problems that have an external source, an enemy, a faction, a traceable origin that can be located and addressed with force. He is good at that kind of problem. He is not good at the other kind. So when the building goes quiet in a way that Aurelio cannot diagnose, he will reach for the explanation that fits the shape of his competence. A curse, a rival. Something that can be fought. He will be wrong. He will call consultants. They will find nothing because there is nothing to find in the places they know to look. The building is not cursed. The walls are not compromised. What is happening to that place, what is happening to the man inside it, is not a wound you can locate with the instruments they carry. I know this because I understand what I was doing there, even if I never named it plainly while I was doing it. Binding the echoes is not metaphor. It is not sentiment. When I pressed my cylinders against old stone, against wood that had been standing for 130 years, against walls that had absorbed generations of sound the way soil absorbs water, I was not preserving history for its own sake. I was returning something. Old structures need living sound the way living things need air. Not dramatically. Quietly, consistently, the way you need water. Not aware of the need until the absence makes itself known. I had been the water. I did not plan it that way. I want to be honest about that. I came to that building because the acoustics were extraordinary, and the age of the stone was extraordinary, and I had a grant and a theory and 3 years to test it. I did not come because of him. I stayed. That is a different accounting, and I am sitting with the honesty of it on a kitchen floor in Garfield at midnight, and the honesty is uncomfortable in the way that true things often are. I stayed because I kept thinking the walls were not the only thing that needed the sound. So here is what I know about day 19. He goes to my workroom. I know he will, because Silas Robinson has spent 4 centuries developing the habit of examining things after he has broken them, not before, never before, but always eventually after. He is not a man who leaves a room unaccounted for. He enters. The hinges are quiet. I oiled them in September because the sound they made bothered my recordings and not for any other reason. I told myself not for any other reason at all. The room is empty. The work table stands where I left it. The shelves are stripped. 1 cylinder. Center of the table. Placed there with intention. I had recorded that child on a Tuesday. A boy on the playground off Camelback Road, maybe 7 years old, who had found something in the dirt that delighted him completely. I could not see what it was from where I stood. It did not matter. The laugh was total. The kind of laugh that has no audience, no performance, no awareness of itself. Pure as anything I have ever caught in wax. I left it for him because I knew, even walking out, even with the cylinder case in both hands and the city opening up in front of me, I knew he would stand in that empty room eventually and need something to hold. I am not soft for having known this. It is not weakness. It is the specific clear-eyed knowledge of a woman who spent 3 years watching a man starve without knowing he was hungry and understood that the cruelest thing she could do on her way out was leave him with nothing at all. So I left him one thing. 1 child laughing at something in the dirt. He picks up the cylinder. I know the weight of it in a hand. Cool, faintly waxy, lighter than it seems like it should be for what it holds. He holds it to his ear. He has never done this before. He always watched me do it with the expression of a man observing a custom he finds quaint. His hand will be slightly wrong at first, the angle off, the seal not quite complete. Then he will adjust.
And he will hear it.
The laugh is 7 seconds. Complete and uncomplicated. The way only a child's laugh is. No self-consciousness, no performance. Just the raw sound of a person receiving joy without filtering at first. He will not be able to tell if it is 5 seconds or 5 minutes. Time does that when you hear something true. His knees give. I know this the way I know things about his building. Not because I was there, but because I recorded 3 years of what that man did not let himself feel, and I know the exact weight of what hits you when it finally arrives. He catches the work table. The wood takes his weight. It is old wood, good wood. It has held heavier things than a king coming to his knees. He stays there for a long time. He does not know the word for what he is feeling. He has not needed that word in 400 years. The word is not grief, and it is not remorse, though both are present. It is the specific, delayed arrival of recognition. The moment you understand not just what you lost, but what you were too certain of yourself to see clearly while it was still there to see. I know that word. I learned it at 31, sitting in a different kitchen, in a different city, with my hands in my lap and the particular stillness of someone who has just stopped pretending. He will stay at that work table until the feeling finishes with him. He will not call Aurelio. He will not call anyone. He will stand back up when his legs hold him, and he will put the cylinder in his jacket pocket, and he will close the workroom door behind him with the same quiet click it made every time I closed it, because I oiled the hinges and good work lasts, and some things you do with care echo longer than you intend. I left the kitchen light on 3 nights ago. I told myself I forgot. I have not turned it off. I turned the kitchen light off on the 4th morning, not because I had resolved anything. I want to be precise about that. I turned it off because Bet knocked at 6:15 to tell me it had been on for 3 nights, and she was beginning to wonder. I told her I fell asleep reading. She looked at me with that brief, filing look of hers and said nothing, and handed me a cup of the terrible coffee, and that was the end of it. Some people let you keep your small untruths. Bet is one of them. I am learning that this is its own form of generosity. She had told me 2 weeks ago, in the middle of a story about her sister's new husband and his opinions on proper tamale construction, that the Sonoran Desert makes a sound at dawn that you have to earn.
Not a dramatic sound, she said.
Not what you'd expect. You have to be out there early enough that the night hasn't fully released its hold on the air, and you have to be quiet enough that you're not competing with yourself, and you have to wait. Most people don't wait long enough. I have been earning it every morning since. South Mountain sits at the southern edge of the city, like something that refused to be incorporated, older than the grid, indifferent to the development pressing at its base. I take the trailhead off Central before 5:30, when the parking lot holds 2 other cars at most, and I walk in far enough that the city sounds drop below the threshold. Not silence. The desert is never silent, but a different register. Insect, bird, the particular dry movement of air through scrub brush that sounds almost like breathing if you stop comparing it to things you already know. I press cylinders here differently than I press them in the neighborhood. Against the base of a saguaro, where the root system fans out beneath the surface. Against the face of a boulder that has been holding the same position for 10,000 years, give or take. Against the dry soil itself, mornings when the ground is still cool and the contrast between the Earth's temperature and the air's creates the faintest movement. Bet was right. The sound is not what you'd expect. It is low, barely there. Like the desert is completing a thought it started before you arrived, and your presence hasn't interrupted it, exactly. But the thought is not for you. I have caught pieces of it on 3 different mornings now, each time different, each time with the quality of something that does not repeat. The messenger arrived at the trailhead on the 4th week, a Tuesday, when the October light was coming in low and gold across the scrub, and I had just caught something extraordinary in a dry wash 40 meters off the path. He was young, silver-liveried, the small pin at his collar, the particular gray of Silas's court rendered in pressed cotton, which looked exactly as out of place against the saguaro as you'd imagine. He had the expression of a man who had been given clear instructions and was hoping I would make following them simple. I read the letter standing at the trailhead, the cylinder case over one shoulder, the morning heat beginning its first real press of the day. The letter was careful, formal. It used language that maintained his position while conceding ground, the specific syntax of a man accustomed to negotiating from strength, writing from somewhere closer to need than he has language for. It did not ask me to return. It asked me to consider. It said the court had matters of urgency. It said my expertise was, and here I could feel the effort of the word choice, relevant to a situation requiring resolution. It did not say, I cannot open my hand properly. It did not say, I stood in your empty workroom and something in me stopped working. I folded the letter along its original creases and handed it back. The messenger blinked. There's no reply? No. He stood there a moment longer, hoping the answer would change. It did not. He left. I went back to the dry wash. I want to be honest about this too. I did not feel righteous. I did not feel the clean satisfaction of a boundary held. I felt the thing I always feel when I choose correctly against my own grain, a low, steady ache like a tooth that does not hurt exactly but makes itself known when you press on it. I have made enough right choices to know they do not always feel good. They feel like the truth, which is a different thing. The recording I had captured before the messenger arrived. I played it back 3 times at the wash, crouched in the thin shadow of a palo verde, the heat building around me. It was there, under the ambient layer, below the birds and the brush breath and the distant low register of the city, a resonance I could not account for, barely present, not a sound so much as the memory of one, the way a note hangs in a room after the instrument stops. It came from the ground itself, or from the specific air above that particular stretch of dry wash, or from somewhere I do not have the vocabulary to locate precisely. It sounded like old wood cooling. I played it a 4th time, sat with the cylinder still held to my ear after it ended, listening to the space where the sound had been. I am a scientist of sorts. I do not assign meaning to recordings that cannot be verified. I note anomalies, I log them. I return to the same location under different conditions and test whether the sound repeats. This is my method. It is a good method. I played it a 5th time. That was on her porch when I came back, which was not unusual, but she looked up from her book with an attention that was slightly different from her ordinary attention, and she said, "You find something today?" "Maybe," I said. She nodded. The way she nods when she knows the full answer is longer than the conversation requires. I ate dinner. I labeled the cylinder carefully, location, time, conditions, temperature. I noted the anomaly, without interpretation. I put it in the case. I turned the light off before I slept. In the dream, I am standing in my workroom, the old one on Monroe Street, and the door is open and I can see him in the corridor. He has the cylinder I left on the table. He is holding it the way I showed no one to hold it, the seal instinctive, as though his hands knew before his mind did. He holds it to his ear. His face changes. Not dramatically. Not the way faces change in films. No collapse, no breaking open. Smaller than that. The specific change that happens when something reaches a person who has been braced against receiving it for so long that they have forgotten they were bracing. A release so subtle it looks almost like nothing. Except I spent 3 years watching his face. I know what nothing looks like on him. This is not nothing. I wake at 3:40. My hand is pressed flat against my chest, over my sternum, the way you press on something to feel whether it is still there. The room is dark. The street outside is quiet, one car, distant, the city between thoughts. My hand stays where it is for a long time. I am not reaching for the cylinder case. I am not going to the kitchen. I am lying in the dark with my hand on my chest, and the desert's unexplained sound still sitting somewhere behind my ribs, and I am 38 years old, and I know exactly what this feeling is. I am just not ready to say it yet. I know he is coming before he arrives. Not because of anything dramatic, no premonition, No waking in the night with his name in my mouth. I know because I understand how he is built. Silas Robinson has spent 4 centuries solving problems by moving toward them, and I am the only problem he has ever had that could not be addressed with force or patience or the particular authority that 400 years of surviving tends to produce in a person. The messenger was the first attempt. The letter was the second. There will not be a third attempt by proxy. He will come himself. I know this the way I know the desert sound at dawn, not because someone told me, but because I have been paying attention long enough that the knowledge arrived without announcement. So I go about my week. Tuesday, I record the dry wash again at first light. The anomalous resonance is there, lower than before, more present, the way a sound gets when what was producing it is working harder. I log it without interpretation, the way my method requires. I walk home in the full morning heat, which by late October has become something you can stand in without your body arguing, and I make coffee on my own stove, the good kind, the kind where the strength is mine to decide. Bet comes over Wednesday. We sit on the porch. Constance Reyes walks past with objection and lifts one hand in greeting without breaking stride, which I have come to understand is as warm as Constance gets and is therefore quite warm. Bet watches her go and says, "She likes you." And I say, "She has never spoken to me." And Bet says, "Constance Reyes has been on this street for 11 years and she waves at 4 people. You're the 5th. Count your blessings." I do. Thursday evening I am at the kitchen table, labeling cylinders, when the quality of the street outside changes. Not loudly. The neighborhood has its rhythms. I know them now. The way I know the building sounds on Monroe used to shift when Silas moved through a room, a pressure change more than a sound, and what I hear through the open window is a car parking where cars do not usually park at that hour, and then nothing. No door slamming. No footsteps on the sidewalk heading anywhere. Just a car.
Stopped.
Quiet. I keep labeling cylinders. My handwriting on the 4th one is slightly larger than the others. I notice this. I continue. I think about what I know about a man who drives himself to a place he has no right to enter, who parks across the street and does not move. This is not the architecture of a king making a demand. This is something else. And the something else is what I have to sit with because it is considerably more difficult to be unmoved by. A king with leverage I know how to handle. I handled the letter. I handed it back and walked into the desert and kept working. A man on a sidewalk who has driven himself to the edge of what he has any right to ask and stopped there. That is a different problem entirely. The window is open because Phoenix in October earns its open windows, and I've been playing a recording softly on the table beside my work. A girl from the 7th Street playground, maybe 9 years old, who had been singing something to herself on the swings last Friday with the specific unself-consciousness of a child who has forgotten anyone can hear her. The laugh on the recording is complete. The same quality as the one I left on his work table, not the same child, never the same moment, but the same essential truth underneath it. The laughter goes out through the window. I know what he hears. I know because I remember the first time I held a completed cylinder to my own ear, the first time the recording came back clean and full and true, and the feeling was not pride, not satisfaction, not the clean pleasure of a thing done well. It was the feeling of having caught something that had no interest in being caught, that existed purely for itself, and having been trusted with it. That feeling does not prepare you for anything. It just changes what you are able to hear afterward. He is sitting across the street hearing that for the first time. I keep labeling cylinders. My handwriting evens out. At some point, I do not check the clock. I am making a deliberate choice not to check the clock. I stop labeling cylinders and sit with my hands flat on the table. The recording plays through twice more. The neighborhood does its evening things. Somewhere down the block, Betty's television is audible through her open window, the particular volume of a woman watching something she has seen before and is not fully attending to. The car is still there. I know without looking. There is a version of me, a version from 3 years ago, maybe 4, who would have gone to the window, who would have looked and in looking, given something away that could be used. That version of me believed that being seen wanting something would eventually produce the thing I wanted. I have spent 4 weeks rebuilding the version of me that knows better. I do not go to the window. What I do at 9:15 is make tea. I take it to the porch, my porch, the front steps where I drink coffee with Ben in the mornings, and I sit on the top step in the evening air and look at the street. He is there. Across the street, on the sidewalk, sitting with his jacket folded beside him on the concrete. The silver of his hair has lost its particular quality. It used to look like weather, like something climate produced, and now it looks like what it is, the color a man's hair goes. His hands are in his lap. His face is turned slightly toward my window, toward the sound still carrying out of it, and his posture is the posture of a man who has run out of positions that protect him. He does not look up when I come out. I sit on my top step. He sits on his sidewalk. The street between us is 20 feet of ordinary Phoenix concrete, warm from the day, lit by the orange sodium glow of the streetlights that make everything on this block look slightly like a photograph of itself. I drink my tea. He does not move. He is not performing patience. I have seen him perform patience, and it has a quality of controlled waiting, of deliberate restraint. This is not that. This is a man who has genuinely run out of whatever he would have used to perform anything, and what is left, sitting on my sidewalk in the October heat with his jacket on the ground beside him, is what was always underneath. I go inside at 10. I do not tell him to leave. I do not tell him to stay. I leave the window open and the recording running, and I go to bed, and I lie in the dark, and I think about the sound of old wood holding a man's weight at the work table in an empty room. He knows he has not earned the step. That knowledge, the fact that he knows it, is the first true thing. I sleep better than I have in 4 weeks. I slept well because I had already made my decision. Not about him, about myself. That is the distinction I want to be precise about, because I have spent enough years confusing those two things. The decision was not whether to let him in or send him away. The decision was who I was going to be when the morning came. A woman who opens her door on her own terms, in her own time, having already done the work of knowing why. That is a different person than the woman who opens it because the waiting became unbearable. I have been both. I know the difference in my body, the specific quality of steadiness that one produces and the other does not. I woke at 5:30, made coffee. The good kind. I did not go to the window. I knew he was still there the way I know when a recording has caught something true, not through the ear yet, but in the quality of the air, the sense that the room is different than it was. He had stayed the night on a concrete sidewalk in the October heat because he had no leverage left and nowhere to perform being fine about that. I let the coffee finish. I poured 2 cups. The porch in early morning has a quality of light I have been trying to catch on wax for 3 weeks, the way it comes in low and lateral off the east-facing houses, warm even before the heat builds, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look considered. The neighborhood was doing its first movements. A sprinkler 2 houses down, the distant diesel of the early bus on McDowell, a dog somewhere stating an opinion about something. He was still there. Across the street, jacket beside him on the sidewalk, his face turned toward the sound of the neighborhood arriving at itself. In the 4 weeks since I had last seen him, the silver had gone flat in his hair. It used to have a quality I could not name precisely, something luminous, as though the color were actively produced rather than simply present. Now it looked like what it was, a man's gray hair, distinguished and nothing more. His posture was the posture of exhaustion that has been sitting long enough to stop pretending to be anything else. I walked down my steps, crossed the street, set 1 cup on the sidewalk near his knee, not handed to him, sat down, the distinction deliberate, and took my position on my top step with my own cup and the particular composure of a woman who has done her grieving privately and arrived at something that is not the same as being over it, but is adjacent to being ready. He looked at the cup for a moment. Then he picked it up with the hand that moved slowly, the right one, the one that had a half-second delay between intention and action. I watched him register that I noticed. He did not try to hide it. Good. We were being honest. Elena, he said. Not a greeting. Just my name, The way you say a word when you have been carrying it for a long time and are finally setting it down somewhere. He drew breath to continue. I waited 1 beat, 2, long enough to hear what shape the sentence was taking. It was taking the shape of an apology, the formal kind, the structured acknowledgement of fault that a man builds when he has been rehearsing the conversation in his head for weeks and has decided that the right architecture will do the work he owes in person. What you owe me is not sorry, I said. He stopped. You owe me the admission that you understood what I was doing and dismissed it anyway. Not because you didn't see it. Because it frightened you. The street made its sounds. The sprinkler finished. The bus passed on McDowell, 1 block over, its weight moving through the ground in a faint vibration I felt through the step. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I drank half my coffee. Long enough that Betty's front door opened and then, reading the situation with the rapid accuracy of a woman who has managed 31 years of 8th graders, closed again without Bet emerging. I noted this with gratitude. Yes, he said. 1 word. The whole weight of it. Not agreement with the phrasing. Agreement with the truth of it, the specific admission that what he had done was not ignorance. He had seen what I was. He had understood what binding the echoes was doing to those walls, to that building, to the air in those rooms, and he had named it small because small things do not have claims on you. Small things do not require you to reckon with what you need. 400 years of not needing anything had built that reflex so deep he had used it without noticing, the way you use a muscle without thinking about the fact that it exists. Until the muscle was gone. He sat with his yes. I reached into my bag. Not the equipment bag, the other one, the one I had packed the morning I left, the one I had carried from Monroe Street to the bus stop to this porch without setting down. There was 1 cylinder I had never labeled. Recorded in the workroom at 3 in the morning on a night I could not sleep, 8 days before I left, when I had walked the building with my horn pressed to the walls because I had known for 8 days by then, that I would be leaving, and I wanted to take the sound of the place with me. I had caught all of it. The groan of the east corridor's old wood releasing the day's heat. The particular hell-breath quality of his floor at that hour. The radiator in the council room, clicking its patient 434. And underneath all of that, so low I had not known I caught it until I played the recording back the first time, sitting on the kitchen floor at midnight with the case in my lap. A rhythm, barely present. Slower than a human heartbeat, more regular, the kind of rhythm that does not announce itself because it has been producing itself without audience for 4 centuries. His chest breathing. Not metaphor. Not wishful interpretation. The old wood of his floor carried it. The specific, barely there percussion of a living thing that had forgotten it was living, recorded into wax by a woman who had been paying attention the whole time he was not. I pressed the cylinder gently against his chest, over his sternum, where the fabric of his shirt was worn soft. He went completely still. The morning around us continued, light, and the sprinklers neighbor starting up where the first one stopped, and a child somewhere on the block beginning the day with some urgent announcement. And he sat with the cylinder pressed to his chest, and his eyes closed, and his right hand, the slow one, came up and covered mine. Not to take it. Not to move it. To hold it there. The sound of it. I have been recording the world for 8 years trying to catch the thing underneath the sound, the hum of a place staying alive, the rhythm of something old refusing to go quiet. I pressed cylinders against courthouses and riverbeds and the roots of 100-year saguaros. I pressed them against his building's walls for 3 years and cataloged what I found and called it preservation work. I knew what I was doing. I just had not said it plainly. I was trying to give something back to a place that had forgotten what it needed. He did not ask me to return. I did not offer. We sat on my porch step, I on the top, he moving up from the sidewalk to the bottom step, 1 step closer, 1 step earned, and I set a fresh cylinder against the wood of the porch railing and recorded the neighborhood arriving at full morning, and he listened. Not politely. Not with the performance of attention. With the specific stillness of a person who has just learned that they have been deaf to something the whole time they thought they were fine. There are others in this city who do what I do. We do not compare notes. We do not gather Sometimes on the right morning, pressing a cylinder against the right wall, I catch the tail end of a sound I did not make, and I know one of them was here before me. We are not saving anything. We are just making sure the world knows it has been heard. This morning, on my porch, in the light coming in low off the east-facing houses, that is enough. Not what was. Not what I am deciding yet. What this morning is. There are women in this city, and in every city where old things still remember themselves, who have walked away from something that could not name what it was losing until they were already gone.
They do not talk about it.
But if you felt something in this story that you recognized, not from a book, but from your own chest, then you belong here.
Subscribe.
Not for the next story. For the women who understand this one.